Hello and welcome to this YourTown, Georgina Spotlight episode. In this straight-to-the-point format, our guest, their organization, and their message is the star of the show. Thanks so much for joining us. What do you say, Ben?
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
I caught you off guard. I don't usually lead in that.
No, that's all right. I like the open-endedness.
How's the summer treating you?
Good. Obviously, we've had some really nice warm weather, maybe a little warmer than comfortable, but
fair enough.
Been making the best of it, enjoying the beaches, and just loving it.
That's cool. Last time we talked, I think T-ball was forthcoming. Is the little guy doing some T-ball?
Oh, we're in the thick of it.
How's
Absolutely.
that going? Yeah?
It's going as well as 5-year-old T-ball goes. It's fantastic to watch, and they're having fun.
Yeah.
So it's a great time.
We need to get that up on YouTube. I think we get some good hits.
I think so, yeah.
What else is going on? World Cup, I know you're a huge fan.
Well, you could say that. Yeah, I think the finals are this weekend, not to date the podcast, but so it'll be very interesting because insert winner here has won.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm a little bit tongue in cheek. I think Ben and I we're actually not massive fans, but Ben, I know you've got a British family, and you're obligated to probably cheer for England.
I do feel that way. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Of course, yes, you're right. Though by the time this airs, we may very well know who actually won the World Cup. But we're happy to see Canada. I mean, exceeded expectations.
That was impressive.
I think we can all be proud of that. Now, Ben, I also know that you're fresh off the plane from Europe, and I suppose we both are.
Yeah, as are you.
A quick trip to Germany for work, and Ben, I also know that you're an experienced traveler, but this was your first trip to Germany. So we're gonna get it on the record. What was the highlight?
Oh, good question. The highlight, as weird as it sounds, I had a great time with you. It was a work trip, but we had a lot of fun there. But the highlight may have been just there's a German racetrack, and one of my favorite drivers passed away there. So a little memorial off in the forest, and a 20-minute walk, and it was kind of a surreal, almost spiritual moment to go hiking through the woods to find the spot.
That's great. Yeah, you're speaking of Hockenheim and Jim Clark, of course. So famous, one of the OG sort of Scottish racing heroes.
Exactly.
Good call. Glad it was a good trip. Thought you might call it the Autobahn because that was also a unique experience.
That was right up there.
Right.
The efficiency of that highway, I must say, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, it's been a good start to the summer. Lots going on, and as you know, it's going to be a blink of an eye. I have to admit, I have one of my biggest pet peeves is having a cold in the summer when it's hot. That's what I've got right now. I'm just maneuvering through it. And I think it has something to do with the germs in that steel tube when you're crossing the Atlantic. So
small price to pay, but I get it. I get it.
We'll kick it soon. But okay, so a bit of context for this episode. As you know, we've had brainstorming sessions about possible podcast topics. What would people like to hear about? What are the stories behind some of the people and organizations that have had an impact, or even just had or have a sizable presence in our town? And it's no secret, at least to us, that the Briars and the Sibbalds have come up a few times. I mean, pretty much everyone in this town knows about the Briars, or perhaps Sibbald Point. Maybe they've been around long enough and they know of the Red Barn Theater, which was deeply connected to the Sibbald family as well. I mean, it's such an obvious and worthy YourTown, Georgina topic. I know you've been in our town now 10 plus years or so, and I'm sure that all these names, I mean, you've heard these before. Maybe you've had some of your own experiences.
Oh, absolutely. We've been there more than a few times for dinner. The Painted Turtle Festival, I believe, or Purple Turtle.
Sure.
Their art festival. We go to that every year. My brother-in-law had his wedding reception there.
Nice.
At the Briars, and I've been quite a few times. Big fan of it.
So even around a decade or so of experience, you've got your own connection. It doesn't take long for us to, for even those that are new to our town, to make a connection to either that family, that name, that property, as an example. Now, I have to admit, even though we had it on the list, I wasn't immediately sure where to start, like how to get the ball rolling on that one. And so it kind of sat there on the list as one that we needed to go back to. But then one day, out of the blue, my inbox chimes and I see a new message from none other than Andrew Sibbald. And as so often happens, we forged some good relationships with our guests, and working off the assumption that it was a good experience for them, they're not shy, and we encourage them to make topic recommendations for other episodes. So thanks to Linda Carino from our Georgina Paranormal Society episode for nudging Andrew in our direction. Very much appreciated, Linda. Nice. Now, Andrew is the son of the last, let's say, proprietor of the Briars prior to its sale back in 2017. But it's also worth noting that he's an accomplished author as well. In fact, and this was part of his motivation for reaching out, he has a whole series of novels called the Emily Twillum Adventures that are actually set on the Briars estate in Jackson's Point. It's pretty cool, right?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, of course, like I immediately placed my order and I read my first Emily Twillum novel. And Ben, I'm telling you sincerely, I loved it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. But here's the thing. I'm going to make you wait to hear more, and let me tell you why. Now, these books, they have been a central part of Andrew's life for the past several years, and I was really excited to do an episode dedicated to the book series. However, as I call out in the interview, there's really no way that I was going to have a Sibbald on the podcast, someone who grew up on the Briars estate, and not tell us a little bit about his family and maybe even the story of the Briars itself, right?
Absolutely.
You can forgive me.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it was on the list. I'm like, I had to circle back to that, right? And it should come as no surprise that as we got into that interview, I quickly recognized that there were really two separate episodes here because there's really two distinct stories. I mean, one is how the Sibbalds came to kind of plant roots in our town, as well as the origin story and evolution of the Briars, of course. But the other is the Emily Twillum Adventures themselves. So, Ben, as mentioned, I'm going to make you wait until part 2 to learn more about Emily Twillum. And to lead into that, we're going to start with Andrew's nonfiction telling of the Sibbald family history and the Briars. So how does that work for you?
That sounds good. It sounds good.
All right. You want to hear more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good. Okay, here we go. All right, well, it's my pleasure to welcome longtime resident of Georgina and author of the Emily Twillum Adventures, Andrew Sibbald. Andrew, thank you very much for being on the YourTown Georgina podcast.
Thank you, Rob. It's a delight to be here.
You mentioned just before we pressed record that you had heard maybe one or two of the podcasts before, and so you know that I typically start these podcasts in a similar way. I'm always curious about what the origin story is of our guests. Most of them are residents of Georgina, or they're just very connected to our town. But I like to know what that story sounds like. And the reality is, when I started thinking about this interview and the role of the Sibbalds in our town, I figured we had to come at it a little bit differently than normal, because I know, and most people know, that the Sibbalds have been here for a very, very long time. You personally, through pretty much your whole life. So let me ask you this: how far back in the story are you willing to take us? How far back in that arc? I mean, should we begin with the Sibbalds' arrival in Canada? How do we do that?
I think yes, just a little further back.
Okay.
Why did we immigrate here in the first place?
Sure.
So the easiest way to start is to think of my great-great-great-grandparents back in Scotland. Presbyterianism had taken over a couple hundred years before, and it required everybody to read the Bible. So Scotland had the highest literacy in Europe and probably in the whole world.
I did not know that. Yeah, I need to add this to my feather in my cap, my Scottish pride here.
That's right.
Yes.
So in addition to the literacy, that really meant that health was much better there as well. So my great-great-great-grandparents had 11 children, 9 sons and 2 daughters. One of the daughters died of scarlet fever when she was 2, but other than that, they all survived childhood, although one was lost on a ship when he was about 14. So not only with our family, but, the whole population was exploding. And Scotland's not exactly an easy place to cram in a whole lot of people.
Sure.
So
it's not all livable terrain. And
that's right. So they needed places to live. So with 9 sons, they need to find property. and the natural place to look is overseas. But they were a little bit late. And after 1812, the British government said, okay, we need to fill Upper Canada, so lower Southern Ontario, with our military, so retired military personnel, so that it was defended. And so by the time my family came around in around 1830, it was just too late. They did manage to get a tiny plot up close to Aurelia.
Okay.
And they were given the permission to be settlers. So my great-great-grandfather, when he was 19, William, decided he wanted to be a farmer. He was sent over here with two objectives. A, learn to farm, and B, find property. So that was 1833. He traveled up from Scotland up to Aurelia and stayed with cousins, the Drinkwaters.
Okay.
And it was there for the first year and loved it. Wrote to his 15-year-old brother, Charles, hey, you want to learn to farm too? Come on over. And so the next spring, his brother appeared. But the Drinkwaters said, two teenager boys, we can't, just not room and probably not enough food to cope with that. So they had to move into a tavern in town. So they wrote back to their parents, and they probably said something like, we're learning a lot, we're having a great time, and we're living in a tavern in town. Back in Scotland at that time, most taverns were also brothels. So
might have sent the wrong message here.
Yeah. So that they're raised a few eyebrows back in Scotland. They decided they better investigate. So Colonel Sibbald was very ill, so he decided that his wife and their 18-year-old son, Archie, who was studying medicine, should go over and just check this all out. So the following spring, 1835, they took the 6-week trip from Scotland, going through New York and up through the lakes and up to Lake Simcoe. And, and they found that everything was good. But
they got some clarification on that tavern part as well.
That's right. They were living a good Christian life.
Very good.
While they were there, it was, okay, here's another opportunity to look for land. So they took a tour around Lake Simcoe on a steamer, and what did they find? But Major Rains had his property up for sale. Major Rains had left his family in Scotland, met two sisters on the trip over, and they decided to move in with him. And so between them and their combined children, he felt civilization was getting a little too close, and they wanted to move north away from civilization. So women was not allowed to own property at that point. But over the next 2 years, somehow she got it through the legal system and through caregivers and stuff like this, the property that she took it over. So they made the decision in the summer of 1835. They arrived from Aurelia on the last boat in November in Jackson's Point, and managed to get all their belongings and their cows and their pigs and their goats.
They put them all in the steamship?
Yep.
Wow.
From there over to what's now called Sibbald Point.
We know it well.
Yep. And so that's how we ended up in Georgina.
No kidding. Andrew, if I could jump back even further, because I want to continue the story. We're going to pick it up where you left it off. But before we rolled the mic, you kind of threw out a name there that caught my attention. Was it Mayflower?
Yeah. So according to my aunt's research, on my mother's side, we have 5 ancestors that came over on the Mayflower.
How cool is that?
So my daughter was up in Thunder Bay studying, and she was asked to do a reflection on how her family came to North America and how the interaction was between the indigenous peoples at the time. And she's just like, and the furthermore we got into it, she says, this is just too much.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, half of the people that she's with were indigenous people, so they had their own story.
Sure.
And the other people, they were all first or second generation, so their story was very simple. hers was
not quite as. It's not quite as. That's amazing. And can I go back to you mentioned, they took the steamboat, they took everything with them, sort of to Jackson's Point, got the last one kind of through there in November. Is it documented? Because your telling of the story is great. It's so detailed. I'm amazed at how much you know about the history of the family. It's amazing. Was there anything in that alluded to specifically why that spot, and what was it about that particular spot that it made sense to plant roots?
Well, it was for sale for one thing.
It was available,
but it also, I think, Susan, my great grandmother, just had a connection with it. Yeah. It does really feel like the lowlands in Scotland. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So we have this spot now. It starts off as a farming opportunity. We brought the livestock over. We've got the land. We're actually, you mentioned 1835, and we I know from a little bit of the Georgina history that I have kind of floating in the back of my head that the Briars itself dates back to the 1840s, right? And so, how do we get there? And sorry if I'm if I'm going into too much detail, but I want to understand how we went from we need a spot for our livestock and whatnot to what we know today as the Briars.
Okay, so Susan, after the first winter, went back to Scotland. Two major events took place while she was away. Her husband died. So she really had no reason to stay at that point. She decided she was going to take her three young sons with her back to Canada. Her daughter also had disappeared. So she has stayed to look after her father. After Susan has said, no, you cannot not marry the person you want to marry. He was a Presbyterian minister. My family were Anglican. And she said no before she left. But I guess on his deathbed, her father said, follow your heart.
Wow.
And so as Susan was coming into the harbor, her daughter was on her way to Jamaica to follow the minister. Eventually, they came back up to Canada. Anyway, of those three sons that came over, the second one was Frank. So eventually, he went back to Edinburgh and became a Navy surgeon. Joined the Royal Navy and was stationed in Shanghai at the very end, retired and stayed on in Shanghai to look after the 2,000 Brits that were over there. But he was on his vacations, which were, typically a year long. He would come back to Canada and visit his brother Thomas at Sibbald Point, at Eildon Hall, and go back and forth and decide, this is where I want to settle. So having fully retired from Shanghai, he was still living with his brother at Eildon Hall, paying $1 a day, which was a lot of money. He was traveling along the road in winter, along Hedge Road, and the Hess curve in front of the Briars.
Yeah, of course.
And along coming the other way from Jackson's Point was this big, wide sledge, huge sledge coming the other way from Jackson's Point, and forced him off the road into the ravine there. So the horse took off into Jackson's Point. He was all in the wet. And he went up, knocked on the door, and young Mr. Boucher, who was living there, said, we're looking to sell the property. And so after a year or two of negotiation, Dr. Sibbald took over the Briars. So we added a new set of characters here, the Bouchers. Captain Boucher was a young Navy captain in 1812. And he was one of the early grantees that received property. He got 1,200 acres, which encompassed Sutton, Jackson's Point, and the Briars. But he met Miss Jackson, and Miss Jackson did not want to live up in the wilderness, and it very was.
Are you saying that Miss Jackson didn't want to live in Jackson's Point? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the six people in Sutton, Jackson's Point, there was nobody there in 1890.
Sure.
There was nobody there.
It wasn't maybe perhaps known as that back then. Yeah.
It was actually called Boucher's Point.
Yeah.
Or before that was Panhandle Point, because it was shaped like a panhandle. Anyway, his father-in-law wanted to buy the harbor. So he sold the harbor and the surrounding land to his father-in-law. He sold what is now Sutton and the Briars to his brother James. And he and Amy took off, rejoined the Navy, and they were stationed in India. So she died very soon, giving birth. So in 1840, they moved back to Canada. He moved back with his second wife, Amy, and they bought property back from his brother James, and built the Briars in 1840.
Wow.
He started developing the property, but 1844, he and their young daughter both caught scarlet fever and died. So the property really didn't get that well developed until Frank Sibbald bought it and spent 10 years, renovating and turning into a real honest to good gentleman's farm. And he had done very well in the Far East, and he was really good with cattle, and he had some prize-winning cattle, and he did very well. Now, interestingly, just a few months after he moved into the house, he was going down the hill locally, and the train didn't sound the chime in time and hit the carriage. He killed one of his Dr. Sibbald's nieces and severely damaged one side, so was paralyzed, I think, on his right side.
Wow.
So he needed assistance. So he asked my great-great-grandfather's youngest daughter, Bessie, to come live with him and care for him. And so she did that until he died in 1904, and then she took on the property for the next 15 years until my grandfather inherited it from her.
Well, wow. We're going to foreshadow. We're obviously going to be talking about your books a little bit later, but the name jumps out right away. Bessie?
Yes.
I know Bessie. Yeah. So that's thanks for sharing those details. And I'm starting to obviously understand the evolution. I'm curious, when did we start to see the transition from it as farmland or as that type of land use to kind of the leisure leisure setup that we know it as today? When did that transition sort of take place?
Well, it really started in 1919 when my grandfather took over.
Yeah.
He was a young banker from Revelstoke for the mountains. He didn't know anything about farming.
Yeah.
And farming was really difficult at that point. He was not a cattle person. Yeah. And within 2 years, he knew he just couldn't operate a farm. Yeah. He and his mother started dividing up the property along the lake and between the Black River and the lake to create a summer community there. And with them, he leased land to them to develop a golf course. Right? Yeah. So they ran the golf course, gave him a little bit of money, but he then didn't have to look after all that property. Yeah. So that community got to know him very well. When the Second World War came around, most of their cooks and any household staff were sucked into either the war in some way, into the factories or the front line or whatever. And the fathers were stuck in the offices in the city, and they needed a place for their families, their wives and children to get out of the heat. Yeah. The dead heat in downtown Toronto. So they asked my father, in 1941, they asked my grandfather to do something. So that winter, he went to all the farms around. There were a lot of empty car sheds because there was no gasoline available. So through the winter, he dragged them over to the shoreline, hired some carpenters to tie them together, and they became our cottages. They were supposed to, a temporary thing. Yeah. They still exist.
That's how that started. That's so interesting.
And then he leased back the clubhouse from the golf club, hired a Chinese cook and 4 farm girls, and it became a resort.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Well, I guess I shouldn't say just like that. It's quite a story and quite an arc, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short time that evolved, and the catalyst was very much kind of evolved post Second World War from the realities that the city folk were facing at that time. That's so interesting. Yeah. Have you ever done the count? How many generations of Sibbalds do we go back? Like in other words, how many generations of Sibbalds have kind of overseen that land?
Okay. Well, my children are I think are 6th in the area and 5th on the Briars property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. No kidding. It's safe to say that the Briars is synonymous with Georgina. Very often, sometimes when you say to people, "Oh, I'm from Keswick," or from Georgina, there's not always recognition necessarily with that name or a connection. But if you mention the Briars, or by Jackson's Point, the Briars, it's usually that's when the light bulb goes off. It's just kind of how people sort of know our town. And I think that even myself, I've lived in Keswick for over 40 years, and safe to say that all the folks I grew up, we all have a connection, some kind of connection to the Briars, whether we've golfed there, whether, I have bought my wife spa packages, perhaps at the Briars. My sister got married at the Briars. My niece's boyfriend works in the pro shop at the golf club today. So, I mean, we all sort of have that connection. And even if it's not the Briars, if you don't have a direct connection there, most people know the Sibbald name, even from obviously Sibbalds Point. Most of us have a lot of experiences from that, even from high school, going and having fun there. I know folks that even just if they want kind of a staycation, but they do want to get out of the house, they'll just go to Sibbalds Point because it's close by. Everything's near, and it's just it holds such a special, sort of a special place in our community. That must have been a really, I don't know if it's hard to appreciate or to see because you're in it, but it must have been pretty special growing up in that environment. Andrew, yourself, would you say that you grew up at the resort for all intents and purposes?
Well, very much. It was a summer resort.
Yeah.
My mother ran the children's program and the recreation, essentially. Mm-hmm. And my father was over there running everything else with a lot of help.
Sure.
And so that's where we spent our summers.
Yeah.
Of course, winters, the resort was closed, and that was where we became part of the community.
Yeah.
But it was part of my troubles. Before I wrote the books, I was trying to prepare historical tours of Jackson's Point. And I realized that when I was a child, I really didn't spend any time in Jackson's Point in the summer because we were so encapsulated with what was going on the property.
Yeah. You were literally on the property. That's
on the property.
You weren't around Jackson, you were on the property.
On the property.
Yeah.
I had to, go out and go through a lot of stuff to try and figure out what was happening back then.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In other words, what's happening outside the perimeter of the resort here? Because it's right. You're in your own little world there.
Yeah, we were resort brats. Along Hedge Road, they were all young families, all the same age. Mm-hmm. There were 40 boys and one girl around the edge of the golf course, and they were all junior members and all that stuff, and it was totally engrossing.
Yeah.
All these friends that were there all summer. Yeah.
Yeah, no question. I also spent a lot of time adjacent to there. You might have picked up from some of the surroundings in our little studio here that I have a racing background, and so I spent a lot of time at 3S go-karts, which is just adjacent to Sibbalds Point, and obviously you're right. You could drive right up Black River Road. I remember our cars got hit by a couple of golf balls on the way up to the go-kart track coming off the which fairway would that have been? But no, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I suspect we could do an entire episode of sort of stories and memories from those times on the resort. Could I ask you though, because there's other stuff that we want to get to, of course, and I might bring us up maybe a little bit closer to the present and to the transition away, and obviously there was an acquisition of the property. What precipitated that, and can you maybe give us a little bit more context around that sort of transfer of ownership? Okay,
so just very quickly, transition from my grandfather down to us. In 1959, my father had taken over the property. Yeah. And the resort really wasn't making it. So in order to expand the summer season, he called by phone every large company in Toronto. And he developed a whole new program for resorts in Ontario where groups would come up in the spring and fall and they would golf and meet and party a lot of partying.
Sounds pretty good, Andrew. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
So that sort of gave the resort a new life.
Okay.
But by the mid 1970s, the resort really was no longer able to support the whole property. So it was either sell off the manor house property for development or do something with it.
Yeah.
There were no other resorts in Ontario that were year-round that didn't have a ski hill. So we spent several years trying to come up with a method, and then my father had to go out and find the money to do it. Again, down to Toronto, he visited on foot more than 100 lenders and eventually found one who would support what he wanted to do. And it turned out marvelously. The joining of the manor house and the coach house, that was really the first restaurant in North America that had light. Restaurants were dark.
Right. Yeah.
And the resort, of course, the restaurant companies, the company go, oh, this is really nice.
What a novel idea.
Maybe why don't we do this too?
Yeah, because traditionally you think, fine dining especially, it's a little bit more, the lights are a little bit lower. There's rich woods, obviously, but it's considered to be warmer, perhaps.
That's right.
But you guys broke the mold in that regard,
we broke
right?
The mold.
Let the light in.
Yeah, and of course, all the accommodation was brand new and was brought up to building code. And then there were a couple of fires in Toronto, and I think it was IBM said, we have to go somewhere that is not going to burn down while we're there. Okay. And they were sometimes like 20 or 30 conferences in the winter.
Wow.
All IBM. And that should create a snowball effect. And through the 1980s, we did another expansion, and it was really, really good until 1990. 1990. Most people don't remember there was a recession then.
Yeah, sure.
But 1989, Red Barn Theatre lost $90,000. My father, as the landowner, had to pay that off.
Yeah.
Then there was a recession, and it was really bad. It was the first time my parents had ever had to lay people off.
Oh, wow.
Before that period, there were more than 100 family-owned resorts in Ontario. At the end of that recession, say 1994, there were 5.
Wow.
One of which was the Briars.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, there were good years, there were bad years. 2001 to 2004, there was another recession. The Americans, and there were SARS, and Americans would not come to Canada because we weren't supporting their war effort in the Middle East.
Sure.
And basically, so that took away 20% of our summer income.
Wow. It's such a volatile, it's
very volatile.
So volatile.
The resorts
industry.
Industry is very, you'd always had, every 4 years you had at least one bad year, but eventually you'd have at least one good year.
Right.
But they become fewer and further apart.
Yeah.
And then 2007 came and
yeah, sure.
Never really recovered from that. So at the end of that recession, people would put all their money into their houses. And when they went away, even though they just spent $10,000 to redecorate their bathroom, they expected when they went away to find something that was even more beautiful than what they had back home. The only way we could sort of continue to retaining guests, repeat guests, that were not here for a long time was to sink money in.
Yeah.
And our new lender, who was no longer interested in the hospitality industry, and it just became more and more difficult.
Yeah. We
went looking for a partner, couldn't find one, and only way to cope with our debt was to sell.
A lot of precedent for that type of business arc, and at some point that just makes the most sense as realities change. Can I ask you, to the extent that you're willing to reflect on it, Andrew, how was that time for the family? Was it one of those situations where it's like, you know what, this is relief, and now we can move on and focus on other things? Or, given the long history of the family with the property and making it what it was and what we all know it to be, Was it more challenging than that, emotionally and otherwise?
Well, let's start with my father.
Yeah.
He was delighted. He did not want his children and grandchildren to be beholden to the property that had been chain around the family's leg for the last 100 years.
He's thinking very selflessly. He's thinking about the stresses and the burdens that he went through and didn't wish that upon his family.
Yeah. Now, for my mother, it was really tough because the Briars was her relationship with the community.
Yeah.
And same with us, but we as the three children really had a strong connection to the property.
Yeah.
The woods, the birds, the fields, they were really a part, and the buildings, they were really part of our core.
Yeah.
So it was difficult, but a huge relief.
Yeah. Okay.
We just looked forward to a new investment in the property to turn it around and bring it back to life.
Yeah, that's great. Andrew, I do think that's a natural segue to kind of where I do want to go next. In speaking with you, though, it's funny because when we first connected about doing this podcast, naturally I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk about Emily Twillum and the adventures and your books. But I also, we mentioned before we pushed record that I can't do a podcast with Andrew Sibbald and not talk about the Briars, not talk maybe a little bit about Sibbald Point. But as we started talking and more of these stories are coming out, and by the way, for our listeners, Andrew did all of that without referring to his notes a single time. So that was all that was all in there. You're a very good storyteller. But I realized that, I think that this short episode there's more there. And I feel like we're going to have to talk again at some point. We're going to have to talk more about the Briars, maybe the Red Barn Theater, more about, I just think there's a lot more there. And so maybe that's just a way of my subtle way of putting on the public record that I may reach out again to talk to you. Okay. Because I find it really interesting. I know our listeners do too, especially those that consider themselves kind of lifers and have that connection to the property and to everything that the family has sort of done for our community. So let me first of all say thank you for that and for being a part of what has made this town so special and such a great place to grow up in. All right. So, Ben, what did you think of my chat with Andrew?
It was really fascinating. Great to get that whole background of the story the whole background of the family and what brought them here.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, first of all, I mean, let me call it how impressive two things were. Number one, just how much he knew about his family's history. Yeah. It made me feel like a little bit inferior or deficient in that regard. But also his recall, as I kind of called out at the end of our time there with him, he did come prepared with notes, but he pretty much did that entire telling from memory.
That was amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
Not bad, right? I have to imagine that at least some of that, I mean, there's maybe from his own interests, but in part two, as we get into the Emily Twillum novels, these are based in kind of, it's some historical fact. I mean, that the Briars estate is the backdrop. So I imagine that maybe some of the research that went into those novels maybe just served him well in general, or vice versa. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait to find out.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think it was interesting to learn that one of the main reasons the family settled in Jackson's Point in the first place, apart from the fact that the property was available, that's kind of the starting point, right? It was that it reminded his great-great-great-grandmother, I believe her name was Susan, of the lowlands in Scotland. Yes. I mean, it felt like home to Susan. And so that's kind of why she planted there. As a couple of Scotsmen, it's true. We can appreciate that, right? Yep. And, I don't know. I think there was so much to it. I personally found it fascinating when you think about places like the Briars and Sibbald Point. You just kind of assume that they were always there, right? But as with so many things, when you start to peel back the layers and dig, there's a story there that's rich in characters and as well maybe some delicate circumstances, which with only the slightest alteration would have led to a very different outcome for the Sibbald family, our town, and kind of the way that we experience it.
That's true, absolutely. Yeah.
Like factors I think about. They were up in Aurelia and they took the steamboat down. They just did did a drive around, and hey, that looked pretty good, and it happened to be available, yes. But even like circumstances like World War II and the impact of the heat down in the city, and many of the women and children and families that were sort of still at home while many of the men were off fighting the war, needed a place to get them out of the city and a place to go, and so there's a number of factors that led to whether the building of the golf course or the development of the resort itself,
or a family thinking that two teenagers had just moved into a brothel because of
that's right,
because of local terms that differed across the ocean.
That's a great point. Like had that not happened, maybe they wouldn't have made that trip over to check in on things and sort of rekindled that sort of exploration. I mean, even when we think about, Andrew called out like little things like the first one of the first restaurants in North America to actually have light. Real actual light. It's kind of a weird thing that you wouldn't think of, but the Briars, even a pioneer in a lot of ways.
It's true.
Yeah, it was. You could tell when you're listening to Andrew just how important, how special that place was, and I'm so glad that we have a resource like Andrew that can sort of share those stories and really keep the traditional spirit of the Briars alive. I can only imagine what it was like with that property as your kind of, I don't want to say playground, but I guess it was in a lot of ways.
It would have been, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you notice that he said that at one point, he thought about doing tours of Jackson's Point, historical tours. And as he started to get into it, he realized, he's like, you know what? I don't know as much about Jackson's Point as I need to in order to do this tour, because I spent my summers were all spent on the property, right? So
what a place to spend them.
And what a place to spend them. I really felt like we could have gone a lot deeper and spent a lot more time, but I really did enjoy that. And I want to thank Andrew Sibbalds sincerely for being so generous with his time and sharing his stories with us. And also, I think I should do an advance plug for part 2 of our interview with Andrew, where we focus on the Emily Twillum Adventures. I can't wait to share that. I mean, apart from the entertainment value of the first novel that I read, I found it educational, and bottom line, it was just so cool to read a book like that, where my town, your town, Georgina, is the background.
Right.
Did you see what I did there?
I liked that. Very smooth.
I appreciate that. By the way, Andrew, thanks a lot for signing that one. I appreciate it. All right. Well, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And of course, subscribe. And if you like what you hear, rate and review us and help us get the word out about this great town. And with that, let's turn it over to our good friend, Bernadette Connors. We'll see you next time.
I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a lady of the lake. I learned to drive on a dirt road, and I got all it takes. I see myself in the water, and my footprints in the sand. The moon can push and pull the tide, but this is where I stand. Georgina, I could never really leave ya. I've been all around the world and still you bring me back again. Georgina, I've got friends in the city, they've got a tower and everything. I tried it out for a little while, but where you don't have roots you can't grow wings. Georgina, I could never really leave ya. I've been all around the world and still you bring me back again. Georgina. myself in the water. I see myself in the water.